Hello everyone, this is part 15 of What If Naruto Met Past Hinata, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist. To see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Hinata once asked Sakura, when they were younger, if she would have changed anything. Sakura had questioned her, head tilting. What do you mean? The girl's eyes had gone soft and she just looked distant for a moment. If you had the chance, would you change anything? She asked again, and she looked as though she was depending very much on her answer, staring at Sakura with the faintest smile painted to her face. Sakura had felt the constriction of being uncomfortable. There was something about the way Hinata was staring at her, it unnerved her. But at the same time, the wisdom seemed to rub off, taking hold and pushing past to the root of the question. Sakura chuckled. If you mean, would I have stopped him for real? Sasuke, you mean? Hinata nodded. Hypothetically, I've always said yes. Sakura said, tossing her pink head, but, would I really do it? Even with the feeling of all the pain and the guilt and everything else. No. She took a sip of her tea and stared into it. I don't say that because I am glad it happened. She whispered, eyes glassing over, I don't say that because I'm happy that it taught me to be strong, of all the ways to learn, but, she stopped and looked at Hinata, her smile coming back, it had to happen, and it would have happened eventually. Hell, I probably would have just let him go. I wouldn't even have said anything except maybe, hey. Bastard. When you're not paying attention for even a microsecond, I'm going to kick you into the next millennium. Or something like that. She laughed, holding up her delicate fist. Hinata smiled, chuckling. They settled into silence. I'm just happy he's back now. Even if it would have taken forever, I would still be happy he's home, and I still would have let him go. Hinata nodded along with her. Bad things happen, but there's always something good that comes out. Sometimes we don't see it right away, but it comes. You'll see it someday, Sakura. She mumbled, and Sakura for some reason completely trusted her, like she already knew Hinata already had seen it way before either of them. She seemed so grown up now, but she figured near-death experiences would do that. Yeah, it'd be kind of like expecting green grass, but asking for no rain to fall. She said with a sigh, and both girls smiled. It's good to have one. You never know what will happen. When something does happen, you don't want to have to think about things like that. Hinata could hear the quiet strain in Kurenai's voice, but she didn't really think anything of it. It was practical, she supposed. But staring at the dress on the hanger was so much different. She'd never gotten around to buying a new one after she'd grown out of her older one, but now she just stared at it. It was a pretty dress with a simple cut. A-line. Modest. Sleeves that weren't too long nor too short. It wasn't embellished anywhere. She stared at it for a very long time, fingering the material. Sturdy material, easily washed. It wasn't that expensive. She picked it up off the rack and folded it over her arm, throwing another article of clothing on top of it, as if she maybe could have forgotten it was there. She'd known its symbolism. It was something subtle. Everyone she knew had one. Sakura swung slightly above her knee, Ino sported a low scooped-in line, Tenten's was not truly solid black, but truly had black dragonflies and flowers stat into it that caught the light and shimmered. Hinata watched the woman ring it up and place it into her shopping bag. It wasn't especially heavy. Unlocking the door to the apartment, Hinata walked in, sliding out of her sandals and kicking aside Naruto's boots from the heavy iron door. The apartment was small. Hiyashi hadn't granted him any extra money, but she didn't care. Naruto was working so hard that missions were less frequent than usual, and so the gap between paychecks was wider than usual, but she kept up instructing job at the academy and somehow, ends always met. Switching on the lights, she moved to the kitchen. Keys went into the dish next to the fruit bowl. She checked the frog clock, it was still ticking. She pushed the thought of buying spare batteries to the back of her mind and continued her movements. She put away essentials, noodles, milk, eggs. Apples went into the bowl, GRS for herself went into the colander in the sink. She'd have to put away those dishes, they were beginning to pile up. With a low breath she put water into the kettle and thought about turning on the burner. Naruto wasn't home yet, better wait. Moving around, thinking about this and that, anything to occupy her mind. The tap squeaked off and she shed her sweater onto the back of a chair and stared at the shopping bag sagging off of the opposite side of the table. She picked it up and walked into the bedroom, dropping the shopping and riffing through it, turning to open the closet, shaking her head as Naruto's jacket fell on top of her. How many times had she told him just to leave it on the floor instead of stuffing it in where it only fell on her? 2 t-shirts, a new skirt, a new pair of slippers since her old ones were so worn out the treads were coming off. The black dress was last and she looked into the bag before drawing it out and laying it on the bed. She street USD it for a long time. It was practical. It was attractive. Hinata shifted her weight. It fit well. It wasn't too clingy, if anything it was a tad looser than usual, but it was flattering. She looked slimmer than usual in it, it made her skin look snow white, and her hair shifted between black and bluish when she turned. That new. Hinata started as Naruto came in, looking quizzically at her as she stood in front of the mirror. She blushed. Yes, she said, turning back to her reflection. Naruto sidled up beside her, eyebrows raised. You look really nice in that, he said sweetly, planting a kiss on her head and then going past her to change. Hinata didn't move, but as he walked away, she walked away, touching the place he'd kissed. It's good to have in case something happens. Why'd you get a new dress? Naruto called, splashing cold water on his face. He heard nothing and turned off the water, patting his forehead with the towel and then throwing it back into the sink. Hina? He asked, coming out, but stopping mid-step. He could see her standing in front of the mirror, but her head was in her hands, and her shoulders were shaking. Hinata, he cried, walking to her briskly, grabbing her shoulders. She let out another cry of her own and he looked puzzled. Was it something I said? Is it the dress? Hina, you look great in it. He continued, really beautiful. She knew he didn't understand his words were hurting her. She knew it wasn't his fault that calling her beautiful was the wrong answer. If anything, it made it harder and harder to accept that maybe she'd have to wear it someday. She'd have to wear it like Kurenai. She didn't want to look beautiful in that dress. She never wanted to wear that dress. Never. She had wrapped her arms around him and the words had fallen off his tongue. Just for a moment, she whispered, just for a moment. Naruto dropped his hands from her shoulders and onto the small of her back. She leaned her cheek against his chest, ear pressed to his sternum, eyes fluttering closed. I just want to make sure you're okay, she murmured. Of course I'm okay, Naruto said, and she squeezed him. Things happen every day, she said softly, pressing her ear through his shirt until she heard it. Her body melted against his. She needed to hear it, she needed to know he was right there, that he wasn't going anywhere, that he would be there. She needed to know that he was with her and he loved her and she loved him so much. She needed to hear his heart. He couldn't shake the dreams from his head. The little boy crying, screaming in the darkness, the heart-wrenching pain in his chest. He searched everywhere in that darkness, he met so many faces. The little boy haunted the images. Little things, his light face, dark hair, his smile, his laugh, arms outstretched towards her, the faceless one whose back was always turned away from him, but never away from him. She welcomed him in her own way with her apron tied back and long dark hair. The way she held the boy with such tenderness, but her mouth always moved in silent words. He watched her from his vantage point far away and slowly, he began to fall hopelessly for her. Something about her maternal ways, something about the way she cared for each thing, the way he could tell she was happy. Other times when she would stop when the boy was not around and her shoulders would quake as she coughed, clutching her arm. He should have noticed sooner the signs that things were not all they seemed. He only asked himself, why did she do that? Other times he watched her sink down onto the surface of the table and she would cry for someone he could not see. He could see her mouth painted with their name, for their life, but she only cried silently, and he could not breach the glass between them. He wanted to help her, he wanted to hold her, to tell her that whoever she missed, whoever she was searching for, he would find them. He promised her, loudly, beating his fists against the barriers. Forever, he said, forever, I will take care of you forever. He wanted to stay in those dreams, He wanted to dream of the happiness he felt with them, but then he had seen in the images of her bloody and slumped against the kitchen counter. Something from the inside leaking out of her and the little boy crying and crying and crying. There wasn't anything he could do to help them. She was going to S. He fought through the nightmares to where they were, past all the painful things that sped him inside, but he had to find her. He had to find them somehow, make sure they were okay. The little boy was still screaming, holding onto her clothes, and when Naruto stepped past the broken glass he saw the boy did not lift his head. They were fading, fast. You can save them, you know you can, the voice echoed against his head, familiar but not, the sound of a woman. He heard the tinkle of bells, the drag of silk clothing, and the cool touch of a hand to his forehead. Don't let her happiness don't let her happiness become merely a dream, the mournful voice asked of him and he quivered. It is all I can give to her, please do not let her happiness disappear, the voice was begging him. Beseeching him. Naruto watched the dream dissolve away and he was left with nothing. He trembled and lurched forward onto unsteady knees. He cried. I won't. He whispered. I won't. He would find her. He would find her, and he would hold her hands in his and tell her that whatever she was looking for, he had found it. He would hold her and tell her was sorry he was so late. Just give him one more chance, one more time to get it right. He wouldn't mess up, he would wake up. He wouldn't waste his time dreaming. Find her. Hokage Sama. The young shinobi, pressed and polished, a cookie-cutter example of Konoha pride, if they ever saw one, edged into the circular office with the energy of nervous anticipation. He moved with caution, shutting the door gently behind him, before turning fully to the space, only to be disappointed to the extreme. It was completely empty. Hokage Sama? He asked again, moving into the open room, hands clutching what looked like a report. Just missed him. The boy, whose name was Hakuto, moved his head sharply to the right, facing the figure leaning leisurely out of the window, a book in his hands. His honey-colored hair gleamed in the morning sunlight, and his gray eyes stormed in the shade, a striking contradiction as he pulled his legs in from the rooftop and let them down onto the floor, tucking the book into his vest, facing the young ninja with a sympathetic smile. Someone really should have told you not to come at this time. Hakuto blinked innocently. Is Hokage Sama on business? He asked, tentative and shy. Sora only smirked, flopping into Naruto's desk chair, twirling the pencil there on the desktop, much to Hakuto's shock at such forwardness. You could say that. He chuckled, if it's business, it's the most important kind. Do you know when he'll be back? Hakuto asked, running a weary hand through his hair. Sora shrugged good-naturedly, staring out the window to the sprawling city. Who knows? Depends, he's down there somewhere. What is he doing? Hakuto continued, stepping up towards the window, looking down at the bustling streets. Sora only chuckled again. Naruto walked around the ambling path, admiring the scenic plants and ambience of the river alongside the garden walks. The air buzzed with life, birds and bugs, and fish in the rivers, the hum of the wind through the great, strong Konoha trees. His bones creaked a little more than they used to, his face a little thinner, but these were only signs, battle scars of a life well lived. His active mind took in all his surroundings as if it were the first time he'd ever been there, though the truth couldn't be more contrary. He'd been coming there every day for over 40 years, and never once did he tire. Perhaps it was the gentleness of the valley. Perhaps not. Perhaps, he pondered, hands behind his back, robe swishing the dusty pathway, that it was the woman standing a ways down, smiling, hands clasped in front of her. Hinata's kimono sparkled, the deep blue of her obi and the ornamental whites and lilacs and the gentle sky blues and periwinkles of dragonflies and lilies playing out across the fabric. The pins, the ones he'd bought so long ago, settled in the crest of her elaborate bun, those little flyaways always escaping the ties framing her face becomingly. Hello, my wife, he said with a twinkle eye and a wink in his smile, watching her light up in delighted response. Good afternoon, dear husband, she said, her voice still as soft as ever, the affection de-sping off of her words like honey. He kissed her temple and she laughed, like wind chimes and sweet music, her hand settling in his. Her hair was starting to silver, but he didn't mind so much the color as the way it had gotten there. Years of hardship, and of sadness and of happiness and gladness intertwined with each, like their fingers. But through it all she remained so steadfastly magnificent he still woke up each morning and wondered how it was he landed such a catch, or more importantly, how she'd ever allowed herself to be caught by someone like him. She was always beautiful, a refined creature of elegance and grace that he could never match. He tightened her hand in his hold with that old familiar guilt he always felt when he stared at her too long. The kind that made him sorry that he was who he was, because it must have been so difficult to be married to Naruto Uzumaki, regardless of his status. He could remember the times when they were not so renowned, the humble times with cramped apartments and food budgets and worries, and the numerous times he'd come home to find her paying bills, that little crinkle in her brow. The loss of their son. The loss of many they loved. The painful track of the daughter, growing up, pushing up through the dirt and mud to reach the sky, where she would always belong, no matter what stood in her way. That defiant streak, that wildness that was born and bred of Uzumaki's stubbornness. The times she'd cried. The times she'd been angry. The times she must have wondered how it all came out so messy. The Polaroids to prove it. Naruto squeezed her hand apologetically and she glanced at him, questioning in that way she always did, always trying to figure him out even though there was nothing to figure. She'd always had him down to the little odds and ends that made up his very existence. He had always meant to keep his promise, but the path had been bumpy and riddled with heartache, and for this, he would always apologize. I'm sorry it did not turn out the way we planned it. Our lives, I mean, he said, as they walked. Hinata smiled, staring at the man who wouldn't meet her eyes, still so bashful even after years of practice. I never had any plans, Naruto-kun. Not one. I was determined to live my life as never-ending surprises. Well, I still am sorry for the outcome. I'm sorry that I couldn't give you a life of comfort. Silly Naruto-kun. She clucked, continuing down the path. You gave me all the life I'll ever want and then some. She sighed, eyes closing. All I'll ever need is the life we have. It is the only one I've ever wanted to live. My only selfish thought is how it will be nice when you can come home. Leave all this business to one of your protégés. She laughed and Naruto smiled despite himself. It will be nice. Maybe we should travel like Kakashi. Or buy a new house away from the main road. He continued and she only nodded in agreement, ambling along, watching the younger couple strolling out of the corner of her eyes. Her heart was warm and steady in her chest. It doesn't matter what we do. As long as we do it together. Naruto laughed. I still will never understand why you ever fell in love with the #1 knuckle-headed ninja of Konoha, or why you decided to stay with him so long. He continued, his rich voice touching her heart. She rubbed the back of his hand with her thumb, staring at it affectionately. Because I've always known how special he was, and I always wanted to be with him, since the very first. She replied matter-of-factly, and I would like to continue to stay with him, if that's all right. Well, what do you suppose we do then? He teased and Hinata turned from his hand and stared up at him, face glowing in the twilight. It was funny, even after all this time his breath still left him when she smiled like that. Her secret smile, only for him. They had stopped, and the breeze was thick with flowers as she held his hand in hers. We'll get around to that, forever, part. She replied, her air of seriousness on the subject endearing. I think we deserve it after all is said and done. Naruto's face softened. And how should we start, my wife? I think we can start by taking a walk in the sun, you and I together, just as always Naruto-kun. Yes, we'll start with a walk, and see where it goes. Naruto watched his gentle wife start walking, tugging at his hand to come along. That sounds like a wonderful idea. He murmured, matching her pace easily, the two of them walking, side by side, hand in hand, the sun high above their heads, following eagerly at their heels. The wedding parade passed by the house, its contents either too drunk or too exhausted to care as the two of them slipped out of the wagon and onto the pavement, both of them laughing and stumbling along towards their apartment building. Naruto. Hinata choked as he pulled her along. She had been laughing, or at least trying to sneakily conceal it ever since he'd proposed the idea they fly the co-op. It was 3 in the morning and the Hokage's wedding celebration was still at its wild, loud crescendo somewhere down the road. Naruto put his finger to his lips and stifled his own laugh, opening the apartment door with a low groan. Shush! He scolded and Hinata only giggled, holding up her white kimono as they passed through the threshold. If they hear us, we're goners. He stressed, yanking his new wife towards him as soon as they'd gotten inside the lobby. Shoved up against the mailboxes next to a potted tree, Hinata's wide eyes gleamed up at him and he kissed her harshly, her hands digging into his hair. Panting, he laid his forehead on her own, their eyes hazy and excited. Mrs. Hinata Uzumaki. I like it. I like it a lot. Have I told you that? Naruto whispered, his husky voice passing over her ear as she caught her breath, his lips finding their way down to her jaw, her ear, her eyelids. I really, kiss, really, kiss, really, kiss, like it. Hinata giggled again, her cheeks completely flushed, her arms around his stopping him for a moment. You've told me, she whispered, before she laid another gentler kiss on his mouth. There was a heavy pause as she leaned up against him. My dear husband, that's really all it took. A new fire went over Naruto, every cell in his body electric and bristled and overcome by that rough and tumble happiness he only felt when something super happened. He wanted to shout that off a rooftop for her, right then and there. He wanted to scream it to anyone who would listen. He was her husband. I love that, he groaned, suddenly pulling them both back and up the stairs. Today was quickly becoming, no had already become, the happiest day of his life, and he was in no mood to let it end. No, he wanted to drag it on as long as possible. The euphoria was absolutely mind-controlling, and she was the reason for it all. He couldn't keep his hands off of her as they ascended, and he really had to try to keep himself somewhat contained if only to get them there quicker. But, at the same time, in Naruto's mind, they couldn't reach their floor fast enough. Laughing and whispering, he pulled her up, trying to hold it together as she continued to gather her skirt, and be dragged at the same time. It wasn't until she completely fell forward onto him, her feet slipping and pulling him down, that they both just exploded into the unsuppressed laughter, Hinata trying to shush them both the whole time, her lips pursed, cheeks red. Shush, shush, she panted, trembling with the silliness of it all. As if there were anyone to be quiet for, everyone was down in the village, celebrating their wedding, probably not even realizing they themselves were completely gone. That was the perk, she supposed, of having a festival for a wedding. This kimono is so dumb. She continued, holding up the white fabric and letting her hands fall down amongst the folds. Yeah, Naruto laughed, holding up one of the ornaments on his own. Why do they make us wear these stupid things anyway? But it'll have to do. Naruto finally gasped, helping her to her feet and then subsequently sweeping her off of them. She shrieked as he wobbled unsteadily for a moment and staggered up the steps, his back slamming into the door nearest to them as she kissed him over and over, taking full advantage of his current state of helplessness. Inside, he growled huskily and she bit her lip, fishing around in her kimono for the key. Naruto raised an eyebrow and she pinched his cheek, trying not to smile. Why you try finding a spot to place a house key during your wedding? She said breathily, her hand finding its way to the lock, still in his arms. Naruto, she scolded as he kissed her again, mixing her up and making it harder to control herself, until finally, she got it and the door swung open. The door, she cried, yanking the key out and watching him kick it closed with a dull thud, pulling himself out of his shoes, and allowing Hinata to kick her own of as well. He pushed past the living room, almost spinning on the rug, but neither of them seemed really concerned until he threw her on the bed, falling down on top of her, letting her slip the shoulders of his kimono down onto his arms, running her pale hands over his arms and chest, both of them locked together in a warm kiss. Naruto, she mumbled, laying an afterthought of a peck onto his lips. He grinned lazily, both of them suddenly overcome by the sleepiness of activity and alcohol from earlier. What? He asked and she pulled away from him, standing up, struggling. Propping himself up on one arm he watched her, and finally he found himself laughing for the millionth time that happy night. It's stuck, she whispered, pulling on her ceremonial hood, it's caught in one of the pins. She cried and Naruto stood up, walking to her as she tugged again, her hair falling out around her, but the hood not budging. Hold on, he said, watching her whimper. He slowly began to untangle it from the twisted locks of hair and pins, until finally it fell, like a white flower petal, or a snowflake, to the floor. Her hair falling about her, and her face moon-white under the open curtains, Naruto couldn't help himself. He turned her towards him, taking her face in his palms, kissing her chastely on the nose. You were beautiful, even in a stupid kimono. he said softly, and she laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. I'm glad you think so. I always want to look my best for Naruto-kun, especially on an important day like today. She chimed, and he lifted her up, his hands locking underneath her legs, her body and his arms flush against him. Nah, you don't even have to try, he commented as she laid her head on his shoulder. Really? She sighed, and he could see her eyes closing as he squeezed her tighter. Of course, Hina-chan. You look beautiful all the time. Slowly, he went backwards, falling once more on the bed, both of them laying there in silence. She stroked his collarbone sweetly and he touched her hair, both of them at a loss. I think we should just sleep, she sighed, listening to him yawn despite himself, snuggling into his shoulder. Naruto felt his body sink into the mattress, the weight and fatigue of the day settling in. Her bare feet curled into the bed sheets and his free hand went under his head as a makeshift pillow. He had wanted more, but somehow, this was more than enough. Even in that stupid kimono? He asked tiredly, but Hinata didn't answer, her soft breathing bringing another sleepy grin to his face. He couldn't really say he minded this time. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.